Why Roman Catholicism fails. My name is Aaron Cortez. I am an Orthodox Christian. Orthodox Christianity is the only form of Catholicism because everything else is papal Protestantism. But that's not what we're here to establish. We are going to be destroying or deconstructing the idea of Roman Catholicism. We're going to be talking about the papacy as stated by Vatican I. And first thing is first, the silence of antiquity and the creedal absence. The Roman Catholic Church claims at Vatican I, or in 1870, this is the First Vatican Council of Roman Catholicism, that the doctrine of papal infallibility and universal jurisdiction was always true, always known, and constitutes the very foundation of the Church. However, this claim is immediately undermined by the historical record of the first millennium. Nowhere in the first 1,000 years of Christianity was the idea of papal claim or papal infallibility or ex-cathedral statements of the Roman pontiff, of the Roman bishop alone constitutes infallibility. Where is that in the first 1,000 years of Christianity? Then you're going to hear Roman Catholic apologists say like, oh, well, it doesn't have to be evident. It doesn't have to be obvious. It doesn't have to be utilized. It was just always there. Well, then if it was never utilized, but it was always there, then it failed to do the very thing that it was set up to do. Therefore, it is useless. It just contradicts itself. The problem of doctrinal latency. If the papacy is the foundation upon which the church is built, why did it take 19 centuries to define it dogmatically? In the history of theology, foundations are laid first, not discovered 2 millennia later. And I believe I put this in the slideshow too. The idea of a doctrinal latency too. If the foundation of the Christianity, of the Christian church, is Rome and the Roman pontiff, because that is the papal claims of Vatican I, then how come the very, very, very second ecumenical council of Christianity, which is Constantinople I, first one was the Council of Nicaea, second one was Constantinople I, how come that council was started, held, and closed outside of communion with Rome? Rome just retroactively accepted Constantinople I. Anyways, the testimony of the creeds, the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed, the universal statement of Christian faith, lists the marks of the church as one holy, Catholic, and apostolic. By the way, the word Catholic comes from the Greek word katholikos, which basically means universal. And no, universal doesn't mean in numbers. It also means the fullness of the truth. And in the universe, there's only one church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ, Orthodoxy. One holy Catholic and apostolic. One holy Catholic and apostolic. It contains no mention of the Roman See as a necessary component of the church's essence. If the papacy were the sine qua non of Christianity, its absence from the creed is an inexplicable theological oversight. Conciliar versus papal origins, which is also something too that Vatican itself, in its Vatican approved documents, the Chieti and Alexandrian documents, which Pope Leo the 14th, currently, he says that those documents speak the mind of the Pope. So, and it's also Vatican approved. Those documents, the Chieti and Alexandrian documents, those two documents prove that conciliarity was practiced in the first millennium of the church. And I believe this is either in Chieti or Alexandrian documents, the quote exists. This quote exists. Rome did not practice judicial rights over the Church of the East. Anyways, conciliar versus papal origins. Historically, the great ecumenical councils were called by emperors such as Constantine, Theodosius, and Justinian, not by popes. If the pope held universal immediate jurisdiction, the very mechanism of calling a council to solve disputes would be redundant. One would simply appeal to the infallible Roman oracle. The fact that the church relied on the conciliar system proves that the papal monarchy was not the operating ecclesiology of the first 1,000 years, admitted by Vatican itself in the Alexandrian and Chieti documents. And by the way, if anybody comments, the Roman See was appealed to by the people. Okay, well, you can also appeal to Alexandria. Appellate structure doesn't dictate primacy. It just proves an appellate structure. You can appeal to Alexandria, Jerusalem, Antioch, Constantinople, and Rome. Next, the conciliar superiority and the case of Pope Honorius. The historical record proves definitive black swan events that disprove the Vatican I claim that the First See is judged by no one, which is a quote from Vatican I, by the way. The ecumenical councils acted with an authority superior to that of the Roman bishop. The conciliar superiority in the case of Pope Honorius. The anathema of Honorius in the Sixth Ecumenical Council, which is Constantinople III, formally condemned Pope Honorius, one, as a heretic for his support of monothelitism. Monothelitism is the idea and the heresy that says Jesus Christ had two natures but only one will, which doesn't make any sense because will derives from nature. It comes from nature. So Jesus Christ had two wills. He had his divine will and his human will, which is why in the prayer of Gethsemane, Jesus says, if it be my will, let this cup pass from me. That wasn't his divine will, his divine nature acting, but he chooses in his person, in the one person of Jesus Christ, he chooses to enact upon his human will. So the Sixth Ecumenical Council formally condemned Pope Honorius I as a heretic for his support of monothelitism. His letters were ordered to be burned and he was subjected to anathema. This condemnation was subsequently confirmed by the Seventh Ecumenical Council and by later popes such as Leo II. The philosophical implication of this is that if a pope, or rather if a council can judge, condemn, and anathemize a pope for heresy, the pope cannot be infallible by virtue of his office, nor can he be the supreme judge of the church. This event proves that the council is the highest authority capable of amputating a heretical bishop of Rome from the body of Christ. The Great Western Schism and the Council of Constance. In the 15th century, the Roman Church was fractured with three simultaneous claimants to the papacy. The Council of Constance from 1414 to 1418 solved this crisis by asserting haec sancta, a decree stating that a general council has authority directly from Christ and that everyone, including the Pope, must obey it. While modern Rome tries to reinterpret Constance, the historical reality is that a council deposed popes to save the institution, proving the papal monarchy is a later medieval invention. I promise you, dog, the idea that the Roman pontiff is the supreme leader, or like this idea of you govern over all Christians, and that you alone can appoint bishops. The Roman pontiff alone can appoint bishops, I believe is also a Vatican I decree. This was not found anywhere in the first 1,000 years of Christianity, which is why all of this has to be justified through the lens of doctrinal development. Doctrinal development doesn't exist because if doctrine can develop, then it can develop outside of it no longer being Christianity. The internal contradiction of doctrinal evolution. Roman Catholic apologists often retreat to the development of doctrine, popularized by John Henry Newman, to explain why the early church doesn't look like the modern papal monarchy. However, this creates a profound logical and dogmatic conflict. Pascendi versus evolution. Pope Pius X, in his encyclical Pascendi Dominici Gregis, explicitly condemned the evolution of doctrine as a modernist heresy. He asserted that the faith was delivered once and for all and does not undergo organic changes into new dogmas, which literally refutes the entirety of Vatican I. The dialectical trap is this, that modern Rome is caught up in a trap. If they admit the papacy evolved, they fall under the condemnation of Pius X and the traditional view of revelation. If they claim it didn't evolve, they are forced to lie about the first millennium where no such papal monarchy existed. And by the way, just because you hear Catholic apologists say that Peter had the keys, that doesn't automatically translate to Vatican I. What do you think when Jesus gave the keys to Peter and also the rest of the apostles? But when Peter given the keys, do you think that Jesus' vision was having a city-state of Vatican, popes having and controlling their own armies? like Pope. I believe this is Pope Leo, the one of the Leos, and Pope Gregory. Hello. And also, this is something too that I really, really liked to add in this slideshow, which is the death penalty case study. For 2,000 years, the church and the Bible taught that the death penalty was a matter of natural justice. Recent statements by John Paul II and the formal change to the Catechism by Pope Francis have declared the death penalty inadmissible. That wasn't the only thing, because I believe Pope Francis, his quote was that the death penalty is against the gospel. It goes against the gospel. But according to Catholic theology, the death penalty is natural law. So wait, is it natural law or is it against the gospel? And then somebody's going to say, "Oh, well, that wasn't an ex-cathedral statement, therefore it's void." Well, one, we have already proven that ex-cathedral statement is a Catholic invention. It's a Catholic innovation. Second thing, even if it wasn't ex-cathedral statement, who are you to tell me that you as a Catholic shouldn't obey that? Because in Vatican I itself, I believe it was Pope Pius IX that was governing Vatican I. He says that not only should you, as a layman Catholic, obey the ex-cathedral statement, but that ex-cathedral statement you should obey all the way down to the ordinary magisterium. And the ordinary magisterium, may it not be infallible, you still must submit to it under docility. Even Trent Horn admits that. Breaking natural law. In Roman theology, the Pope cannot change natural law. By attempting to abolish a principle of natural justice, the modern papacy has demonstrated that it can and does alter unchangeable dogmas. This is proof that the modern Roman institution is not the true church, as the true church cannot contradict its own dogmatic history. This doesn't mean that people cannot make mistakes. We've had countless heretics, we've had countless theologians, we've had countless theologians who err, but in the dogma of the church, you cannot contradict. But that is going to be the conclusion for today. In the evidence presented underscores that the Roman Catholic claim of a divinely instituted, unchanging papal monarchy is historically and theologically unsustainable. By contrasting the rigorous synodal and liturgical life of the first millennium presented in the Orthodox Church with the legalistic forgeries, doctrinal evolutions, and modern ecumenical shifts of Rome, we see a clear departure from the apostolic good deposit. Forgeries, the donations of Constantine, which was used in order to prop up papal supremacy, in order to prop up the idea that the Pope can elect and control his own army. The true church is defined not by a singular monarchical see in Rome, but by the faithful preservation of the faith once delivered to the saints, as we have seen through the acts of the ecumenical councils and the witness of the church fathers. Any office that claims to be above the judgment of the church or capable of altering natural law effectively separates itself from the body of Christ. The path forward for the seeker of truth is to return to that pattern of sound teaching that requires no forgeries or modernistic updates to justify its existence. Return to orthodoxy, Christ's true bride. My name is Aaron Cortez. Please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel, and I will see you in the next video. God bless you.